Hello, my name is Natalia, and this is my cat Frosty, and we're going to show you how to make a felt notebook cover with an appliqué maple leaf design. These are the tools and materials that we'll need to create the notebook cover: leaves, some regular white paper, a pencil, a fine tip felt pen, freezer paper, some fusible web adhesive, which I'll explain more about later. We'll need some colors of felt, embroidery floss, embroidery needle, pins, a ruler, scissors, and of course, a small notebook. The first step is to sort through your leaves and decide which ones are going to be the right size and shape for your notebook cover. You can use a single leaf or groups of smaller leaves, whichever looks best to your eye. I like to use fresh leaves because dried leaves might be too fragile. And to make the leaves lay flat, simply put them between two sheets of paper towel and give them a quick press. The next step is making a rubbing of your leaf. Simply place the leaf between two pieces of regular paper and using the side of the tip of your pencil, rub all around the edges of the leaf. Don't worry if it looks a little bit messy. This is just an intermediate stage that's going to help us find the outline shape of the leaf. So after you finish rubbing, use a fine point pen and start tracing around the outside edge of your leaf. Because this is a maple leaf, I'm using a series of small jagged triangles, which I will connect to finish the shape. And because this is meant to be a natural piece, it can be a little uneven. You can go in and adjust as needed until you're happy with the shape. And of course, don't forget to make a stem. After tracing the leaf, you're ready to transfer it onto freezer paper. So the first thing to notice is that the freezer paper has a shiny side and a dull side. You want to place the shiny side down and the dull side up. I find it's easier to attach my original drawing to a window, and that gives me a bit of a light box so I can see my pen line more clearly. And simply go around and retrace your design onto the freezer paper. Again, making sure that you're drawing on the dull side of the paper with the shiny side facing down. After you finish tracing, simply rough cut around the outside of your leaf. We'll make a more detailed cut in a minute. Now it's time to attach the fusible webbing adhesive to the back of your piece of felt. So this fusible is sandwiched between two layers of paper. I find it's easiest to first cut a shape that's the size that I'll be needing. Little frosty. So go ahead and cut that out. And then peel off one side of the paper. And you'll notice that there's little tacky dots left on the other side of the paper. Place that on the back of your felt. Smooth it out. And trim the edges just so that these extra bits of glue won't get stuck on your iron or your ironing board. Now, to attach it more permanently, give it a quick press with your iron, but do not use steam yet. We'll use steam at the very end. Now, the fun part is, place your freezer paper tracing on top of the felt and press again. And the great thing is the shiny side of the paper will attach to your felt, holding it in place so that you can cut around all the details of the leaf. I find it's easier to cut out a rough shape first. That way when I'm going in and out with the little cuts, I don't have quite as far to go. So simply start at one side and cut in and out until you've completed the whole shape of your leaf. After you finish cutting around all the edges of your leaf, go ahead and peel off the freezer paper and save that piece of freezer paper. It will be reusable. It'll iron on multiple times for more leaves. Now we're going to start measuring the felt to make our notebook cover. You'll want to add 1/4 inch to the top and bottom of your notebook measurement. So for my example here, I'm going to cut this piece of felt 7.5 inches. I'm using a ruler to mark 7.5 inches in a couple of places. That allows me to line up the ruler to make a nice straight line. And trim off any excess. Now, ideally, I would cut the length of the felt about 2.5 to 3 inches longer on each side than the notebook is. But because my felt is a little bit too small or my notebook's a little too big, I'm going to attach extra pieces in order to get the length I need. So I've simply cut 2 pieces of 3-inch wide felt. I'm pinning them to my centerpiece with about 1/4 inch overlap. And using 2 strands of embroidery floss, I'm going to do a simple in and out stitch to attach these flap ends. Now, in this example, I'm using the same color felt that I have for the main part of my notebook cover, but this would also be a fun opportunity to play around with adding some contrast colors. Sides, lay your ruler across the top edge of the notebook cover in order to draw a line to know how much to trim on that little flap piece. You could eyeball this, but using a ruler is the better way to do it to make sure everything is in a straight line. Now, Keep your notebook closed and place it approximately in the center of your piece of fabric. And make a little adjustment to make sure that the fabric is evenly folded in half. Now you want to wrap the fabric around while the notebook is closed, because if you do this while the notebook is open, it'll come out a little bit too tight, because there needs to be a little bit extra fabric to allow the notebook to close when it's finished. So once you've got the edges folded in, use your fingers to crease that folded edge just a little bit. We're going to press it in a minute to make it more permanent. And use a pin to hold the flap and the outside edges together in each corner. The notebook from the felt. And you could go ahead and just fold it in half for the leaf placement, but I find that it's a little bit easier to have it open so that it will lay flat. So I'm placing the notebook on top as a guide to know where the halfway point is. And then just to visualize, I'm placing a piece of paper over the rest of the cover so that I'm only looking at what will eventually be the front cover. Now I'm going to take my leaf that's cut out and I'm peeling the protective fusible paper off the back, and I'm going to lay it down wherever it looks good on my front cover. And the nice thing about this fusible is before you iron it, it's easily lifted up and replaced as much as you might need. Once you're happy with the position of your leaf, go over to your ironing board, and this time we're going to use steam. This will permanently attach the adhesive and also helps make the folded edges of the notebook cover that you have pinned, it helps make that crease more permanent once we remove the pins. So go ahead and give that a really generous steam press all over. You'll want to have about 30 seconds of full steam on top of your leaf to permanently attach the fusible, but also the steam helps the glue dissipate so that it's not going to make your needle sticky when you go to do the embroidery. So again, very generous, at least 30 seconds of full steam. And now we're ready for the fun part, embroidering your leaf. You can choose a brighter color, a matching color. For this example, I'm actually going to use a variegated embroidery floss that's dyed with all shades of orange from light to dark. So the first thing we're going to do is remove the pins from the corners so that we can open up the flap. We only want to be sewing through one layer. Don't get the flap caught underneath at this point. And we're going to use 2 strands of embroidery floss and just do a simple running stitch in and out, a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch on the top stitch and about 1/8 of an inch space below. Although you can make your stitches a little bit bigger or smaller, whatever's comfortable for you. And you simply want to continue this stitching around the outside edge of your leaf. Here's a tip to keep the back side of your embroidery looking nice and neat. When you reach the end of your thread, take a small stitch going only through the back of the felt and draw that stitch first through one loop and then another loop. And as you pull, that'll make a small knot. And then the trick is you'll want to bury the end of the thread by stitching underneath so that it's going under the leaf on the front side. This won't show on either the back or the front. And then snip it off close to the back of the fabric. And now you're ready to continue making concentric rows of stitches until your entire leaf is filled to the center. Embroidering your leaf, we're ready to close the flaps and finish sewing the edges of the notebook cover. So turn your flaps back to the original position that you pressed them with the crease, and this time place your pins vertically to hold the inside corners of each flap in place. This will allow you to start sewing at the outside corners and have that flap held until you get closer to that section. Now, this is going to be a blanket stitch, and I like it to look a little bit more chunky, so I'm going to use all 6 strands of embroidery floss. Start by drawing your needle from the inside corner of the flap to the outside corner. This is going to be the upper left corner of the overall cover. And then working with the needle coming from the back to the front, pull the thread most of the way through, but leave a little loop. And then bring the needle from the front to the back through the loop. And that's how simple a blanket stitch is. So again, you're coming from the back to the front. I do my stitches about 1/4 of an inch spacing. Pull the thread most of the way, but leave a loop, and then go from the front to the back through the loop, and gently pull to tighten everything in place. And simply keep stitching until you have completed the whole top edge of the notebook, and then you're going to repeat the same process on the bottom edge. So here's another tip, again, to keep things nice and neat. When you reach the other end of your stitching, draw the needle to make a small knot on the back side or the inside of the flap. And then, just like we did with the leaf, you're going to want to bury the tail of that knot so that there's no string hanging out. So after you've made a double loop knot, simply bring the needle through only one layer so that it's going to be buried inside the crease. And then clip the end of the thread close to the fabric. And now that your notebook cover is finished, you're ready to insert the notebook. So just gently slide the flat front and back covers underneath the flaps. Might need to wiggle it just a little bit. I sometimes find that it's helpful to bend the second cover of the notebook just a little bit to get it tucked inside the flaps. But once everything slides fully in, it should be a near perfect fit. And there it is, ready for gift giving, sketchbooks, notebooks, journaling. I hope you've enjoyed this process.